Hi, my name is Sarah Fincel from Fincel Sweet Corn, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to freeze sweet corn. The first part is you want to start with fresh picked sweet corn. Sweet corn has a small window of time which you can pick it and eat it and have the best quality. So preferably start with some corn that was picked fresh the same day. And our family farm does that. We pick fresh and we only sell fresh sweet corn. After you have your fresh sweet corn, you're going to clean the corn and get all the shuck off and try to clean as much of the silk off as possible. When you have all of your corn ready, you're going to get your pot of water boiling, which I have already done, and you'll be able to see that it is a nice steady rolling boil in here. And as soon as our water is at a rolling boil, we're going to go ahead and put our sweet corn in. I'm going to start with 3 ears today. And once we put our 3 ears in, we wait until the water is back to a rolling boil, which it still is. And from that point, then we're going to start the timer for about 2 minutes. Now it actually cooled down when I put the cool sweet corn in. So we're going to wait just a moment for it to get back up to a boil before we start our timer. We're only going to be blanching the corn today. The purpose of blanching the sweet corn is to kill off any enzymes that are in all fresh fruit and vegetables. And the enzymes, if we don't kill them off, will change the flavor and texture and lose the sweetness in the corn. So we're just going to be blanching the corn. And as soon as this gets back up to a rolling boil, as I said, then we'll start our timer. So sweet corn only has a very small window of time within which it can be picked, which is in 3 to 4 days when starting a new field. Some varieties are faster, and when the nights are cooler, it goes a little bit slower. You have a few extra days in there. But that's when it's best enjoyed. After that time period, the sugars change to starch and it gets a little bit tougher. So you want to pick it and eat it within that period of time. And if you're going to keep the corn after it's been picked, you want to eat it within 3 to 4 days as well to avoid losing the flavor and texture and quality of the corn. So ours is getting back almost up to a rolling boil here. And as soon as this happens, you can see that I'm getting the bubbles coming up in here. I'm going to go ahead and start my timer. So getting the corn back up to a boil is important. You don't want to cook it more than 2 minutes because that's all the time that's necessary to kill off those enzymes. If you cook it any longer than that, it's going to further cook the corn, and you don't want to cook it any longer than you need to, because you are going to be cooking it after you reheat the corn. So we have the timer on. We have all of our supplies that we need ready to go. I have a few different knives that you can use to cut the corn off the cob. You can use a standard knife, which I have here. Otherwise, I have a couple specialized knives that are used just for cutting sweet corn off the cob. This one has a shield, and it also has a curved blade, so it'll fit against the cob and get as much of the kernel off of the cob as possible. This is another option. There are a few other options that you'll find available in the store that are round that you can just push down over the cob of corn. Some people have used a bunt pan to put the corn cob in the center and cut straight down. I have a bowl, and then I have a measuring cup on the bottom, so I'll be able to set the corn right here, and I'll cut down and I'll demonstrate with that shortly. After your corn is finished with its timer, ours is coming up on its moment here, we're going to pull the corn out and put it into a bath of ice water because we don't want to cook it, as I mentioned, any longer than I mentioned before. So ours is actually about 1.5 minutes, so that will be ample time for me to take the corn out of the boiling water and put it into our ice water bath. So I'm shaking off the water, picking the corn up and putting it into the ice water that I already had prepared. Turn off the water here. So as soon as the corn gets submerged in here, it should cool pretty quickly. And as soon as it's cool to the touch, then we can go ahead and start cutting the corn from the cob, which I'm going to go ahead and do right now. So I have my bowl ready, which I showed you before. I'm going to take one of my corn cutters and turn off my timer. One of my corn cutters, and then I'm just going to cut down, trying to get as much of the kernel as I possibly can. Just going around. I use the bowl so that it doesn't go all over the countertop, so that way we don't get a messy countertop. This time I'm going to show you using a knife. You can cut straight down if you don't have one of these fancy apparatus. And you can actually take the back edge of the knife and push down to try to get any additional juices out of that corn as possible, so that you can have as much as you want for the winter and preserve those good flavors. And I've actually talked to some people from older generations that have kept the corn cobs after removing the kernels and used them, boiled them, and made them into a simple syrup. And then they can actually make a sweet corn jelly out of the simple syrup that comes out of the corn. So I'm going to take my last ear here. Again, just cut straight down, getting much of the kernel off of the cob as possible. You want to use more mature corn when you're freezing corn because you have a larger kernel that you can cut off of the cob versus very young corn that's going to have a small kernel that you won't get as much of a yield when you want to freeze it. And so now that I have my corn all cut off the cob, my last step is just putting it into a freezer bag, and then it'll be going into the freezer for the winter. So you can see I just put into a freezer bag what I believe would be a good size for my family, a good serving size, which is usually about 4 ears of corn per freezer bag. This is 3 cobs, as you remember. And I'm making a little bit of a mess to clean up later. Try to get as much air out of the bag as possible. And then you're going to try to squish your corn flat, because it's a lot easier to thaw and quick than if it was in a big clump. I'm going to put the date, which today is the 24th. So I know when I froze this, and then I can put it in the freezer, and that is how you freeze corn.